can cause pain. Now, what you're watching here is a living embodiment of a partnership between Life in Abundance UK, i.e. me, and Life in Abundance Jamaica, our hosts. And I sincerely hope that what I'm going to speak on for the next 50 minutes isn't a living parable that illustrates this failure. Hopefully, it won't. I also wanted to take a leaf out of Dr. Layla's book. I'm glad that he broke the ground with a little toilet humour this morning. So in a moment, I'm going to share a story which is subject to interpretation. But first of all, I just want to set the scene. What we're going to be looking at today is 4 potential partnership killers. Poor communication, poor expectations, poor power gradients, and poor conditions. Those are the 4 topics around which I hope I'll be able to offer some thoughts. And of course, if any of these thoughts are not of the Lord, I pray they just disappear into the ether. But hopefully some of them might be what the Lord has to encourage us today. So I want to start with poor communications. An English lady was visiting a far-off land, and she was looking for a room to rent for a subsequent stay. So she asked the local pastor if he could recommend any rooms. He took her to see several, and when it was all settled, she returned home and made the preparations for her journey. But then she thought to herself she had not seen a WC around the place. So she wrote to the pastor, and she said, "Could you tell me, is there a WC in the room?" Pastor thought, WC? I went to the library and he found the book. Oh, of course, it's a wayside chapel. WC, yes. So he wrote back to the English lady and he said the following. "Dear Madam, I take great pleasure in informing you that the WC is located 9 miles from the house. It's in the middle of a grove of pine trees surrounded by lovely grounds. It's capable of holding 229 people and is open on Sundays and Thursdays. As there are many expected in the summer months, I expect you to arrive early. There is, however, plenty of standing room. This is an unfortunate situation, especially if you're in the habit of going there. It may be of some interest to you that my daughter was married in the WC since she met her husband there. It was a wonderful event. There were 10 people in every seat. It was wonderful to see the expressions on their faces. My wife, sadly, has been ill and unable to go recently. It's been almost a year since she last went, which pained her greatly. You will be pleased to know many young people bring their lunch and they make a day of it. Others prefer to wait till the last minute and arrive just in time. I'd recommend your ladyship plans to go on a Thursday, as there's an organ accompaniment. The acoustics are excellent. Even the most delicate sounds can be heard. The newest addition is a bell, which rings every time a person enters. We're holding a bazaar to provide plush seating for all, since many feel it's long needed. I look forward to escorting you there myself and seating you a place where you can be seen by all. Yours in Christ, the pastor. Wow, what a misunderstanding. What a communication failure. We can all see how that failure occurred. And I expect many of you have got a similar story of misunderstanding. Now, of course, this is light-hearted. And in the context of a partnership between people, churches, organizations, such misunderstandings can, of course, be disastrous, maybe leading to a strained or broken relationship. And I wonder, as I look out on all of you today, thinking particularly upon some of the sessions we talked about earlier this morning, about the global north and the global south, I wonder whether there are any of these unyoked, unhelpful partnerships that some of you carry as a burden. Maybe some of you feel that weight, or maybe some of you have got pain and brokenness because of failed partnerships, things that didn't go well. I hope that we can look at some of that today, and maybe if we have a little chance at the end, let's pray through that. Now, you might define a partnership as an interdependent relationship of trust exists between individuals or ministries, local and international, know each other well and share complementary gifts, resources and experiences in order to achieve a common goal. And the common goal, of course, we learned this morning is the Missio Dei. In the company of so many distinguished theologians and Christian leaders here this afternoon, I don't presume to offer much which will be new to you from a theological or from a scholarly perspective. However, using the idea that we are one body with many parts, I thought I'd use the background gifting that I have to perhaps bring a slightly different perspective to this topic. If nothing else, you'll learn a little bit about accident investigations for aircraft that you didn't know before. What's he talking about? I'll tell you. Before Works for Life in Abundance, I was a pilot with MAF, Mission Aviation Fellowship. Maybe you've heard of us. Fly a lot in Haiti, or did until very recently. And I used to fly in Kenya for MAF, which is where I first met Dr. Florence actually. Had the privilege to fly with many different Christian organizations and churches, delivering help, hope, and healing. And our part of the Missio Dei was to be Samaritan's donkey, to provide the essential logistics for ministries going on up country and in the wider context. Now, as you know, flying is a highly complex and technical endeavor, and of course it can be a dangerous one. There have been many aircraft accidents over the years, and while I was preparing for today's talk and looking at those 4 topics that I shared at the beginning, it struck me that a lot of the issues and lessons that I've learned from aircraft accident investigation are in fact very similar to some of the issues and the pitfalls we're looking at today under the heading of partnership killers. Might have seemed a little strange to you, but hopefully it will become clear. If I may then, I'd like to use an example, indulge 5 minutes of your time to give you this example from the aviation industry to unpack these partnership killers and hopefully offer some ways that we can avoid failure, minimize difficulties in the future. So, the particular disaster I want to look at is one that some of you may remember, some of you may know of. It's called the Tenerife disaster, and it happened in 1977 when 2 747 aircraft collided on the runway. One was taking off, one was taxiing at Los Rodeos Airport in Tenerife. The collision occurred when they hit, and the fire killed all on board one aircraft, most of the others, and with over 500 fatalities, it was the largest single loss of life ever in an aviation accident. The reasons, well, there are many of them. The first one is that neither aircraft should even have been there, because a bomb was set off at Gran Canaria Airport, a big airport where all the big planes are. And as a result, these 2 aircraft and lots of others got diverted there. Secondly, both aircraft had to taxi along the runway. If you pass the next slide. Because of all these aircraft that were parked up here, it wasn't possible to do what aircraft should do, which is to taxi along the taxiway and then have a nice clear runway to take off in. So one of them taxied down here, turned around, got ready to go. The second one taxied down here and was halfway down when disaster struck. The third factor is that, well, you say, well, why did this happen? How is it possible that 2 big aircraft could not even see each other? Well, third factor, it was fog. Tenerife is an island, and a lot of sea fog comes in, and there was rolling fog, and so the 2 aircraft couldn't see each other, which means that they relied on air traffic control. But here's the last problem. Air traffic controller and the 2 sets of pilots had some miscommunication. It wasn't clear. And when one of them got here, he said, "We're ready for takeoff." And the controller said, "Okay, you ready for takeoff?" And the captain said, "I'm ready for takeoff." And the controller said something which wasn't clear. And the aircraft taxiing down here also spoke at the same time. And I don't know if you've ever had a situation where you have 2 mics together and they go, a big interference noise, and that's what happened. So the pilots couldn't hear the controller saying, "Stop, stop, stop, stop." They just couldn't hear each other properly. And as a result, as I said, this crash happened. Another factor, final factor, is that the captain of this plane here was a very strong character. He was the big captain. Nobody challenged him. Nobody could challenge him because he was the In Swahili, we say the Bwana Kubwa, we used to say the big firm, I think. And the two other pilots in the cockpit with him both raised red flags. And he said, no, we're going. He was, I think, wanting to get home for his daughter's birthday or something. He was desperate to go. He was anxious to be off. So he went anyway, despite the warnings of his two other crews. So, the next slide, please. The causes were poor conditions, namely, diverted, it was foggy, and it was busy. Poor communication. Are we clear for takeoff? Well, I didn't hear properly. The third one, poor expectations. I want to get home and I want to get home now. And the fourth one, poor power grading. So why do I mean power grading? I mean relationship between those in authority and those who are part of the team, but are way, way down the line of authority. And a power gradient that's too sharp makes for bad decisions. Higher power gradient that's too flat can also make for bad decisions, but no one makes a decision. That's what I mean by power gradient. So I'd just like to look at these in the context of partnership. So in a Christian context, what would poor conditions look like? Well, you may be familiar with this story. You see, it's the rainy season. Our church is struggling right now because we don't have a pastor. And there's a big international conference on in Kingston, so all the hotels are fully booked. And then I've just got a phone call from a global North church who want to send a mission team next week here. What could possibly go wrong? Well, it's bad timing, isn't it? Conditions aren't right. We feel that we're enabled and we have sufficient authority to say to this big mega church, sorry, you can't help. Or do we feel under pressure? Because they're a church that supports us, they're a church that funds us, they're a church that's a big part of our ministry. We feel under an undue pressure, perhaps, to accept this mission team, even though it's going to cause problems, not only for them, but for us. See? So that's what I mean by poor conditions. We've got to be aware of those conditions and maybe be ready to actually say, well, let's pause, or let's at least take account of them and maybe plan ahead of it. The next one, poor communication. Well, this is especially a problem when cross-cultural communication is concerned. You've already heard my story of the Wayside Chapel, but I've got a couple of others to share with you. One is from my brother-in-law, Richard. He worked for a French engineering company, and he was a manager involved in ensuring that the supply chain went well. And there was a key component for the factory, and he was in France, and he learned French like I did in school, and he was getting much better at his French. How many people speak French here? Okay, I'll interpret. And he went to his secretary and he said, it's very important that this part arrives in the next 2 days. So, he said it in French. He said, do you know when it's coming? And she said, which literally means tomorrow or after tomorrow. He was like, what do you mean after tomorrow? Is it going to be a week, 2 weeks? What he didn't realize, some of you might speak a little bit of French, après-demain actually means the day after tomorrow. It doesn't just mean any old day, it means the day. And just that subtle difference in language, not knowing, my brother-in-law not knowing that après-demain meant it's going to be Thursday, where demain is Wednesday. He got really upset and angry with the secretary. After about half an hour, they worked it out, they laughed about it. Being French, they went out and had a cafe about it, whatever. But there was a big problem for those few minutes. How many times have we had that same situation? We think we're speaking the same language, we think we understand each other, and actually it's not working. Also, cultural practices. First time I was in Kenya was in the early 1990s. I was just a young, like a schoolboy almost, I was 20. And I was taken to the electricity company by my boss because we were trying to figure out, sort out a problem with the electricity supply, because we were paying too much. And so we sat there and I didn't know what to say. I was keen to be a good missionary. And there was a very important man sitting there and he was taking notes. My boss was explaining to him whatever. And at the end of the meeting, I can't remember the details of the discussion, but there was a plan for him to come to the hangar to look for himself at the electricity setup. And as I parted, I left the door and I said, "Oh, it's very nice to meet you, and do come and have chai with us. Come and have chai with us." Now, if you know anything about taking culture, that's a big red flag, because that means, "Come and I'll give you a bribe." Well, that was the context in which I think he understood what I was saying. No, I thought it's just being nice and inviting. But these are the pitfalls that we can come into when we don't understand cultures that we're dealing with. When we don't have not just the specific language of the appel de main, but also when we don't understand, the use of idiom and of what, things that might mean something in one culture, something very different from another culture. I've got lots of examples like that between British English and American English, but that's not appropriate for this room either. I'll leave that. Remember the encouragement from the Bible when you're tempted to blurt something out like I was in that electricity company. James 1, verse 19. "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry." Okay, the next one, poor expectations. Well, yeah, hi, thank you so much for the funding provided. The building project has taken a year so far. I know that. Yes, I know that, Your Excellency. Well, the thing is, yes, I know the money was sent a year ago, but the problem is we needed to get permission from the city council. Yes, and as you know, they haven't met for a while because the mayor is in dispute with the president over the distribution of funds. And we finally got the permission, but then there was a problem with the materials. They were delayed on the boat. So when we finally, then we got the materials, and they arrived at the beginning of the rainy season. So we could start building to dig the foundations, but that would only be for swimming pool because of the rain. Yeah, and then at the end of the rainy season, well, guess what? It was an election. Yeah, I know, like last year when you sent the mission team. Exactly. So, okay, yeah, well, we promised to have it done by next year. No, I promise. Thank you. You see, poor, unmanaged expectations, particularly when there are things that could have been foreseen, but perhaps we hoped they wouldn't happen, or perhaps we just thought that we'll leave it in the Lord's hands and it'll be fine. Well, maybe. But what I found in my experience, particularly dealing with donors who were giving money to MAF, was to think about what could go wrong. What could go wrong in this scenario? And then to really carefully manage the expectations of the donor or the strategic partner, to build enough buffer, enough margin into the system so that those expectations are managed really, really well. This is, of course, a particular issue when finances are concerned, and especially where the global north has the purse. So they often expect things to happen in a time frame that they're not actually familiar with because they don't understand on the ground. So it's our job, say our job, as an honorary member of the Global South, it's our job to ensure that there's really good communication in order to facilitate that good expectation. Yeah. And then finally, poor power gradients. Now this can be very tricky, of course. It cuts both ways. If perhaps here you're a minister of a larger congregation or a large Christian entity, be careful not to be overbearing on our smaller brothers and sisters. Let's ensure there's a forum or place where each partner gets a seat at the table and gets to speak. And I encourage you, if you're in a relationship with a Global North church, that you advocate for yourselves in that you ask for a seat at the table where you get to share what you believe the Lord is doing and how you believe He's speaking to you and how He might need to use you to speak truth to power. The same way that my pilot or the KLM captain needed a first officer to speak truth to power to him. In fact, he did. But the power gradient was such that the message didn't get through. So we worked really hard to ensure that we've got good power gradients, not too steep, not too shallow, so the message can get through when it needs to. This is important directive to those of us from the global north. We think we are wise, we think we understand other cultures, but we can so easily make very, very wrong impressions. And if a global north church organization benefactor has caused you pain, I feel that deeply. I want to pray with you that is something that, well, the Lord sees it. He knows. He knows. And don't forget what Dr. Florence said this morning. Now is the time for the Church of the Global South to rise up and take our place, to not be silent. And I'd like to pray into 1 Timothy 4:12 with the Global South Church. Do not let anyone look down on you because you're young. Weirdly enough, Global South Church isn't young. It's actually older than the church in the global north. Check your Bibles and look at Ethiopia. But do not allow anyone to look down on you, but set an example for the believers. Speech, life, faith, and in purity. Like I said, the fallacy is the global south is not a young church. In fact, it's older than the global north. But it's now our time. We're all children of God. Sometimes the big brother or sister can lean a little bit too heavily on the yoke. We talked last year at GMC Africa about the yoke when two oxen are tethered together. And can you imagine if you have a very powerful oxen that's pushing too hard, and it's not preferring its weaker brother, and it's not waiting for the one that's coming up to come up? Do you know what happens? They just go around in a circle. They don't go where they go. So I think it's a very important lesson to get the power gradient right, to be aware of it. Okay, there are other, as well as these, there are patterns that go beyond aircraft accidents, which the aviation industry has learned to recognize. And in a similar vein, I think there are patterns to partnerships that we may have experienced or that we want to engage with to help for us as we move forward. Patterns for aircraft accidents are these. There are always multiple causes of failure. You see, over time, they learned to not just have one pilot in the plane, but have two. To not just have one engine, but have two. To have multiples to provide redundancy. You may have noticed, being a good kind of pilot trainer, I've got two sets of glasses here in case one breaks, right? So having a bit of resilience, you see, that's part of the aviation industry, is having resilience. So that if there is a bit of a failure, still get home safe. The other one is multiple opportunities to avoid the issue. There were multiple opportunities on that day in Tenerife to avoid, right? If the terrorists hadn't set off the bomb, well, the aircraft would have been in the wrong place. If there hadn't been overrun with other aircraft, they'd have been able to taxi the normal way. If they had just listened carefully on the radio, then all would have been well. Finally, if the captain had listened to his co-pilot, all would have been well. See, there were multiple opportunities to avoid that accident. And it's, well, we'll get on to the application for us in a moment. Third one is that learning and sharing reduces future accidents. There are lots of lessons learned by this particular occurrence. The biggest one was the power grading between the captain and the co-pilot. Talked about that already. Now, in an aircraft environment, any member of the crew can call an abort, and whoever's flying has to obey, even if they don't agree. It's also carried over now into the medical profession. And if you're medics or you know much about the medical profession, anyone in the operating room can call abort when this revered godlike surgeon is about to cut off the wrong leg. A number of times it's happened. And nobody dares to question the surgeon because the surgeon is gone. And yet he's about to do something which is off the wrong way. So it's recognizing that we all have a part to play as a team. And yeah, the more we learn and share failures in the past, lessons that we've learned individually, actually, the more it can help us reduce accidents in the future. The other one is the penultimate one is most accidents are unintended. By which I mean, be kind. There's a thing called Hanlon's razor, you may have heard of it. It says, never attribute to mischief that which can be adequately explained by stupidity. What it means is, we make mistakes. And a number of times we look at someone and we say, why did you do that? You know, and we assume that they've done it deliberately to hurt us. They haven't. It's their ignorance, sadly, or it's because they didn't know any better. And so, again, speaking into the situation where you may have experienced pain or brokenness at the hands of, or that hasn't been helped by someone that you've been in partnership with, a ministry that you've perhaps been in partnership with, it's not bad. I'm not saying all the time. Hanlon's razor was about 80 to 90%. But you may have been one of the 10% where somebody acted deliberately in a way to destroy your industry. I sincerely hope that wasn't the case, even if there was, God sees. But most of the time, I believe, it's simply a question of us being fair human beings, failing each other. So we need to have grace, I think, when we're failing in a partnership situation. Most accidents are unintended. And finally, we've come a long way, there's always more to do. That's why in the aviation industry, there's always a push for greater quality, greater safety. There's always less to be learned. There's always a momentum towards improving that. Well, surprise, surprise, I think all of these apply in the Christian sphere. So, spiritual patterns. There's usually more than one cause of failure. You can imagine a perfect storm, and you've probably all experienced this in spiritual warfare. The devil tries to line things up negatively, doesn't invite failure. This includes discouragement, persecution, and how many times has there also been a moral failure that goes along with it? A key member of your church, just at the time when you needed it least. However, there is usually more than one chance to see what's happening and to put things right. But it's important to act, not just to pray and hope that it will work out. I think the Lord wants us to act. As we learn, we share and review, we do help to reduce problems. This can be difficult and painful, and sometimes embarrassing. But sharing failures as well as successes is critical to helping others. Acknowledging our brokenness is actually part of the path to helping others to acknowledge their brokenness and to foster restoration. You think of all those failures and restorations in Scripture from Peter and back into the Old Testament. These were all written to help us and encourage us. So let's do the same with each other. I've got one final story to tell you on this, which is a story of an old missionary lady in Kenya, a white missionary lady. She was on a bus one day. It was a cramped bus. She was standing up. She was holding on to the pole. She had a bag over her shoulder like this. And suddenly she felt something brush past her arm. She looked and her watch just wasn't there. And she thought, oh no, there was a guy who was bumping up behind her in the bus. She thought, I know what's happened. So she said, very quietly, but very deliberately, in Swahili, over her shoulder, put the watch in the bag. And there was a sort of grunt. And so she ducked it in the ribs with her arm, put the watch in the bag. And there was this corresponding. So then, very soon after that, she thought, I'm just going to get off the bus, I'm going to run home. She was so upset. So she got off the bus, she ran home, she walked into her little apartment in Nairobi. She opened the door, walked up the stairs, went into her bedroom. There on the side was her watch. So she looked in her bag, and there was a man's watch in the bag. And I tell this story because I just want us to be aware of not making assumptions. It's like, oh yeah, everybody said Nairobi is a dangerous place. Yeah, we need bags of forgiveness, we need bags of grace, we need bags of understanding with each other. We can laugh about these topics, but you know, it can hit us hard. So we've come a long way. I guess it was in broad daylight. So you see, we've come a long way, but there's always more to do. I'd like to briefly show you a picture that you've seen already today. This is the Life in Abundance model. And I share this with you not because it's perfect, but because I believe it goes some way towards fostering the sort of partnership, the sort of relationship that we're hoping to see. Okay? The first, as you know, is that the church is at the centre. Well, we've heard that from the very beginning this morning. And we place great importance on the church being at the centre. And normally not one congregation, but more than one. So there's a sense of mutual accountability, which is an important safeguard. So that's one of the ways that we try to plan ahead and to have some resilience built into the system. Second is we go for local leadership. Local leadership always ensures that the decisions are made at the grassroots, where the information is freshest and where the right decisions can come. Rather than someone hundreds or thousands of miles away saying, I know what they need. It's actually saying, no, it's the local context that helps to derive where a holistic need is. And we talk about holistic with the 4 quadrants, which maybe you might remember from the video. The third is, it's always a tailored solution. Our promise, our commitment is to work with and through the local church leaders to help them figure out for themselves what works best in their context. Hopefully, it's holistic and integrated, as the model kind of suggests. And thirdly, in terms of fifthly, in terms of managing expectations, we have a 3-year fixed time frame. So from the very beginning, we're setting the expectation of our partners that we'll work with you, we support you, we will train with you, we will engage with you, and we will see you run 3 years. And then at the end of 3 years, we get to see you run further. Like the same goal, but after the 100 meter mark, like beyond the track. So I hope you can see that our model tries to approximate to it, but we're refining it all the time because we always want to improve. So I'd like to finish, because we've got a few minutes left, maybe some feedback, maybe some prayer. I'd just like to finish with my final slide, which is a summary. All good pilots have to have a checklist, and here's my little checklist. So, in terms of communication, oh, by the way, you can all have a copy of the slides. Yeah. Regular, open, and honest communication between the partners is the way to be. And clarity over terms. It's important to define those terms so that we don't get confused between our wayside chapels and our water closets. Expectations. We'll never assume and plan ahead. And even for some big projects and things, like if there's a building project or there's a large, partnership that's going on, some people don't believe in and think that they're bad, but it's worth considering a memorandum of understanding. It just helps you to actually think through the whole project, and it helps you to then have clarity, at least written down at some point at the beginning of the project. Sometimes you get to the end and you say, wow, it worked out so different from what we thought, but it was good. The Lord was in it. So it's worth considering a memorandum of understanding, even if it's just one that you write for yourself, perhaps between you and the Lord, right? And then power gradients. Are we being listened to, or are we listening enough? Perhaps to those at the levels that we don't consider to be the leaders, but who really know what's going on the ground. It's amazing how much important information you get. When we worked in Chan, the lowest paid member of staff on my team in Math Chan was our gate guard. He was one of the first people in the country to actually discover that the president had been shot. Do you remember President Debbie was killed in a battle up in Northern Chad in 2021? And his helicopter flew him back down to Jamaica by night. And our guard, who was outside our hangar, happened to see the helicopter come in. So I got some important intel. Nobody else in the country really knew. Now we weren't sure because we just saw this helicopter, but then the next day they announced it. So make sure you listen to everyone. Are decisions being made by the right people? In other words, are we allowing decisions to be taken at the grassroots level where the understanding is? And then finally, build in some margin, build in some resilience. I'm sure you've got an extra microphone like we did this morning, and think about what could go wrong, what has gone wrong, and adjust if necessary. Let's keep on thinking. So that concludes my humble attempt at helping us to identify some partnership with us. I wonder if anyone has a testimony, or if they feel that the Lord has said anything to them that they would be bold enough to share with us on this topic.
I'd like to share. It's kind of go with credit. So we have a missions partner that we had an event with last year. So during the course of the event, it became apparent that there were some things that they were doing in a manner that were a little bit different from how we should or would do it. Complicated because my husband was a missionary from America to Jamaica, and therefore my husband looked like them, and I don't look like them. My husband had already passed it. But the thing is, so now they're dealing with me from a different culture in a direct way. I am not American and I'm not male. So I have to be leading, trying to manage a process. And then I realized that they wanted to do some things that even Uncle Don advised them against it, that we couldn't use money as a bait in missions. Yes, Uncle Don, right? So, Uncle D, right? So he even said to them, it's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. It's not a good idea to give away money to people. We're looking at 10,000 US dollars. Yes. Can hear me? Yes. So you were saying that it's not a good idea to give away 10,000. Yes. Yes. Give away 10,000 US dollars on competition. So when I spoke to the gentleman, he said we need to have bait when we're presenting the gospel. So it got really complicated because we were bringing in an artist from overseas, a very popular artist. The artist came with a certain amount of money to be paid. He expected me to raise maybe 70 or 80% of the money. The South would raise 70, and the North would give 20 or 30. And I'm very really. think I'm gonna walk around in America and hold a hand. Anyway, we went through with it, but something miraculous happened. The North Church had an appeal the Sunday before they came and raised 30-something thousand US dollars. He communicated that to me, so I went, oh, hallelujah. After I went into the minister's account, we were a non-profit, so we were, and I paid, I put the $10,000, I paid the football teams, then the US, I paid the money, and then after that, I reminded him, you said that there was something $1,000 US given in gifts. The thing has ended, and he's not saying anything to me about it. So I am not going to allow the ministry's account to go into because I know that the money was given. So I said to him, I know you are a person of honesty and integrity. And he was offended. Because I said, can you please have our US, because it's a 501c3 in America and a non-profit in Jamaica. It's the same organization. So funds come from that side to this side. So then he said, I said to him, let me have our US administrator talk to you about the one. He said, remember that the lady was going to give the diamond ring, didn't he? I said, I'm not talking about the diamond ring. I'm talking about the offering that you spoke about, that you told me that was miraculously given. So can you please pay over the money? You know what he did? Went into the group that we had, and he showed the math or the figures. And he said, this church in the US, their contribution was like 40-something thousand US dollars. Spice Global Center, like $6,000 only. So I said to him, could you please remove that from you? You and I are having a conversation, not everybody, but please. So he paid over the money, and I wrote him back, thank you very much. Sent him a nice card, and then I said to him later on in a letter, I appreciate all that you have done with my husband in the past and what you're doing with us now. But we really have different approaches to ministry, and the two of them are not going to get together. Not right now. We're not going to be giving people money. Because I went to the bank of Donovan Rose, it was supposed to be $10,000. He said I should add 2,500 US more because he needs cash to give to the people. They were giving out US $100 bills from the state. Yeah. So I had to say, they were a major partner, and that has happened with more than one North Church since my husband's passing. So I just have to learn that if we think differently from different ends, we're going to get hit, and we just have to take it in good grace. So I thanked him and never heard from him again. It feels a little funny, you know, I'm expecting to get something back. So sometimes I wonder, should I reach back out to him and ask him, you know, I mean, did you hear what I said? Are you understanding me? But sometimes we have to listen. And I feel that I have to listen. That was one.
Thank you. Thank you.